Hello and welcome again to another XenTegra podcast with context. I'm your host, Phil Sellers. I want to welcome you to Nutanix Weekly, the podcast all about Nutanix from your friends here at XenTegra. We do these to not only talk about what's new and what's coming, but we do this to also be able to add some real world experience to the conversation. So, as always, I've got my trusty co-pilot, Mr. Harvey Green from XenTegra Gov, riding along today. Harvey, how's life treating you?
Pretty good. I have this wonderful appointment that I don't want in about an hour to make sure that I get this message out to my pen pal today.
Well, there's always something on your to-do list. There's never enough time in the day. I know that, and I feel that these days too. We've also got our friends from Nutanix, Mr. Jirah Cox. Can I also just publicly say happy birthday to Jirah? We're
Hey,
recording this on his birthday, so very, very happy birthday to you, sir.
Thank you. I'll find out in an hour and 2 minutes if I'm the pen pal Harvey's talking about.
I really, really wish that it were you. I am sending a letter to good old Uncle Sam.
Oh, that kind of.
That's right.
Yeah, so it also happens to be tax day. I called my accounting office this morning and I wished them a happy tax day. So I got a boisterous laugh on the other end.
I bet.
That's funny.
Yeah, welcome to the United States, where we give you a really hard math problem and penalize you if you get it wrong.
And by penalized, like you might go to jail.
And that also brings
they
us
only
to
penalize you if you get it wrong and it's less.
Yeah, right.
That's true too. They don't give it back, do they?
Yeah, this is the price is wrong.
And that also brings us to our other Nutanix friend, Ben Rogers. Ben, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm having a good laugh on this one because, gentlemen, I got my taxes done about 2 weeks ago. I thought I was going to owe the government. I didn't owe anything. My wife owed a little bit of money, but we got beyond that, and I feel sorry for everybody that's having to deal with it today. My heart's with you, but I did not have to do that, so I'm in good spirits today.
It is no better minute than the last minute when it comes to taxes.
Well, so I will say something about my marriage. I work for an employer, always have, so I get the W-2s and all that. It's real easy for me. My wife, she owns her own business. So it's always a struggle between she and I because February 1st, I'm pretty much ready to go. I'm looking at her, got my nice little envelope stacked up together. Let's go, let's go. She's got like a mound of receipts and all the other crud that she's got to deal with. And by April 1st, I'm looking at her going, you either get it together or I'm going to file without you. And so, the one question I haven't asked my accountant, talking to accountants today, is I've never asked how much taxes I pay for my wife. I have learned over the years that that's probably not something I want to know. And if she gets by with me funding her taxes, that's okay at this point in our relationship.
There are just some answers you don't need to know.
Exactly right.
Well, guys, I appreciate you hopping in again today. We're all over the place, not in all of our normal places today. I know Ben is in the car at a golf tournament. I'm in the office in the XenTegra headquarters today. But this is par for the course for us, right? We work from anywhere, and that's the whole idea behind what we do as a business is enabling productivity no matter where we're at. That's our heritage, right? And we were first known as an EUC company, but that's not all that we do today at XenTegra. We're looking forward to the future, and so in that vein, I'm happy to talk about a blog that's really forward-facing, something new and something different. On the last episode, we shared that several of us were out at Nutanix's Global Tech Summit, and one of the common themes that got talked about during that event was Kubernetes. And it's pervasive throughout the industry, but Nutanix is doing a lot in the space. One of those things is Nutanix has acquired D2iQ, formerly Mesosphere. Now it's a really popular distribution for running Kubernetes, and the integration of what's happening there is something that's, I guess, in the news. So we've got a blog post today called Announcing the General Availability of Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes. It's a mouthful. It's a long name.
Yes.
What is it? So the tagline on it says it's application-aware data services for cloud-native apps, simplifies the platform engineering. Article today, shout out to Aaron Delp and Patrick Campbell. These guys co-authored the blog that we're going to review. Let me get it shared on screen for anybody watching on YouTube. And I can't share the screen right now, so I'm going to work on that. In the meantime, I may have to ask for an assist from one of my compadres here. Harvey, maybe you can share it for us.
You want me to be your tech guy?
Yeah, please. I'm coming for it, man.
And while you're teeing that up, I would like to say something about the acquisition of this company. I got to see a few of their leaders who are now Nutanix employees speak at GTS. And man, what an awesome group of people to bring in our organization. They were influential in the development of cloud. I'm going to let Jirah kind of expand upon this, but when I was a Nutanix employee, we're listening to these new Nutanix employees coming from this group. It really gave me some confidence that, man, Nutanix is really fixing to up the game when it comes to containers, what we're doing with containers, the technology with containers, and these individuals' insight of where the ball is moving in this world really fascinated me. So the acquisition not only brought a product, but it brought a lot of smart individuals to the organization. So I'm excited that we acquired the product, but I'm more excited that we acquired the individuals that were working for the organization that are now employees of ours. So going to be some exciting stuff coming down the pipe in regard to that.
Well said. Totally.
So, Mr. Sellers, I got a womp when I tried to share. So that's out.
Oh, gotta love this. Well, technical difficulties being what they are, we won't be able to screen share, but let's dig on in, guys. I hope everybody's got it up on their screens and we'll talk through it. So what's the blog post about? Well, there's a new thing, a new product called Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes, or NDK. Jirah, what is NDK?
So here's my unofficial definition. I've been using it for a while because we've been previewing this as upcoming since I think since .next Chicago last year. And we have customers that run Nutanix, of course. That's what makes them customers. See, this is an in-depth podcast. And some of those customers also run Kubernetes, right? And so the Kubernetes clusters themselves are commonly managed by Kubernetes admins. They might be the Nutanix admins, not required to be, and vice versa. To run Nutanix, not required to learn Kubernetes. But of course, Kubernetes itself is augmented and enhanced by data services, right? Because the applications that it runs are fundamentally stateless. You turn them off, they reset back to their baseline of how they shipped, right? So all of that state that has to get preserved and recorded needs to live outside of those containers, right? So that usually means a file share or a block volume or object storage or something, right? And so with NDK, and that data services is something that Nutanix provides super well, right? We do file shares, we do object storage, we do block storage, we do all of the things. But we love this proposition of helping our Kubernetes clusters for our customers consume Nutanix storage without those folks having to go learn Nutanix, and helping our Nutanix admins understand what's on their clusters without them having to go get intimate knowledge of Kubernetes, right? So it's like a decoder ring that kind of goes both ways, helps Kubernetes folks get goodness out of the cluster that they run on without being a Nutanix trained operator, and helps the Nutanix folks understand what their responsible for, right? Is the data backed up, replicated? Is it healthy? What's the permissions on it? Without knowing what the application's doing or how it's mounted or accessed or what that even application might do. So it's kind of this real great meet in the middle decoder ring technology that helps both halves of the house, the app team and the platform team, understand what's going on there. So that's been my unofficial definition for a couple months now that I've given to customers. Let's dive into the blog post and see how accurate I am.
Yeah, the blog post here, it talks about the extension of Nutanix Cloud Platform. So our well-known AOS and all of the services and things around AOS, into application-centric data services is what the blog post says here. With NDK 1.0, platform engineers can make it incredibly easy for developers to build and run containerized application workloads without scrambling for the storage management resources. As Jirah, as you said, most containerized applications are stateless, but data has to live somewhere, right? I mean, how important is that persistent data, I guess, to the conversation?
It'd be hard to overstate the importance, right? I mean, I can't think of too many apps that are very useful without that state being preserved, right? If I hit save, if I add new data, if I add new cells or columns, they need to be there next time, right? Otherwise, we get different kinds of phone calls.
So I love being the one that learns on the fly on these podcasts. Jirah, one of the questions that I have about this is talk to me about, like, when I think of stateful applications, I'm thinking like a database, and we're getting to the point that databases are now being rolled out in containers. Is this kind of where this is shooting, where if I had a database and I was containerizing that and I wanted to make sure that all the changes were saved in it and that it was, man, on live ready, is that kind of where this is driving to? Is that one example of where we would be using our data services with containers in a stateful environment?
So it's one possible way. I mean, you would need to preserve. So preserving state, right, is a fancy way of saying saving what the application does, right? So that applies to a database if you're running a database in a container, but applies to basically just about any other kind of container you'd ever run either, right? So whether it's a small little app that tracks my DNS entries or my laptops in my company or anything, right? The data that the application saves is outside of the container that it runs in. It's got to be somewhere else. And it's probably important to the business that it gets saved somewhere in a predictable, repeatable place that can be retrieved later on.
So this is what's been kind of wild for me over the last couple of weeks is I've done a partner tour. And we talked a little bit about this on a podcast, I think 2 podcasts a month ago. One of the things a lot of partners ask me is, how have you been able to develop all these silo products like NDB, NDK, files and objects? How are you guys able to do that in the platform? And I have to remind them, and Philip, you said this at the beginning of the podcast, it's all about AOS and our ability to manage that data. So that's how we're able to develop these other silos that are coming out. And that's what's going to make this so cool for NDK, is that we understand the back end storage of this. So again, it's just another extension of what we're doing with AOS. And that's really important for our customers and our partners to understand, because that's what gives us the ability to do these things. And that's also what differentiates us from our competitors. And so as we bang against competitors, we go, feature for feature, we end up reminding a lot of our customers and our future customers that, hey, a lot of this is built on our awareness and good as of managing the storage, which is where the product started and continues to shine, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's also, and I'm going to refer to the graphic here a little bit further down. I mean, it's also important to say that, although you've got your own Kubernetes engine and you've just acquired another, I would call D2IQ a Kubernetes ecosystem, you're also friendly to partner ecosystems like OpenShift. And so the foundation here is not so opinionated that you have to fit in a certain box. You've got the ability to have choice on top of this. And operate this new style of Kubernetes and cloud native next to your virtual machines, all on the same foundation. And I was actually a little shocked running around in Prism Central the other day, and went into the App Store, and I saw that Red Hat is a first-party citizen where you can click to deploy OpenShift right inside of Prism Central, and I hadn't seen that before. So I mean, not just are you friendly, but you're making it super simple to deploy these applications onto the platform. That's a huge deal to me. Harvey, we talk a lot about friction, and I mean, what sticks out, I think, with this strategy is as you think about friction.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing that sticks out is the lack thereof that they're building into the product. You kind of just hit on that a little bit, but I mean, I'm very, very much all the time about flexibility, and being able to utilize more than one option, not being locked into anything specific. And this is just another illustration of the work that Nutanix is doing to make sure that you're not locked into any platform, including theirs, honestly. So you've got the ability to go in and utilize these different options, be able to change on the fly, use multiple options at the same time. I mean, that makes a huge difference when you're, just getting into this and just maturing as you continue to go down the route of, moving your applications to a newer style.
Yeah, and the vein of choice is important, right? The right location, whether that's geographic or a hyperscale partner or a value-added reseller, having choice is really about, making sure that you're not locked in and you have flexibility in the future. Because I think if there's one thing we can underscore from the last 2 years is that massive changes are probably inevitable in our industry. That can be positive, that can be negative. It all depends on your perspective and your use case, but having choice is probably the best thing you can do to reduce risk as a customer. So we're having that in spades here. The other thing the blog post goes into is straddling this two world. A few years ago, I kept hearing Gartner and other analysts talk about bimodal, operating in two modes of fashion. The old style with virtual machines, the new style with cloud native. This is bimodal at its heart. It's allowing you to do data services for Kubernetes and data services for your traditional VMs, because you can't just snap your fingers and big bang, we're all on cloud native today. It takes time. It takes refactoring, right? What is in the core of this, Jirah, I guess, that we're not thinking about from a data services standpoint? It's more than just storing data, right? There's other services here, right?
And I think the question centers around what else can you do with the data, right? So as my applications get built, but over time they always want to grow, right? As they get more important, they need more availability. I need to be able to report on, is this data replicated? Is it available? As they get further down the path of higher velocity software development, right? Then my ability to clone them becomes more important to how do I help my developers get access to better data to build the application with, right? Like, how do I help dev look more like prod and do that more frequently? So all these kind of data management activities are important to what customers can do with the feature set, right, around NDK, so that as I build these apps, but also as I run them, like day 0, day 1, and day 2, all these things stay in play and help me out here, right? So to your point, choice, of course, for like no matter what the application looks like, or that flavor of Kubernetes, right? It's not just like NK, like our built-in native upstream vanilla, but stuff like OpenShift, right? How do we help bring this value to kind of both these kind of offerings is really key.
Yeah, and Jirah, I will say I just looked down and saw your message. Yeah, NDK here is not D2IQ. They're not the same thing, and hopefully I didn't confuse that at an earlier point in the podcast. These are two very different things, but again, to kind of point out that there's choice. You can do the Nutanix owned opinionated stack. You can do Red Hat's opinionated stack. You can do pure play Kubernetes. And NDK is an underpinning, or I like to think of it as a bridge, I guess, a bridge to your data from the Kubernetes to that data layer, between the two. So it is that enablement layer with all of the powerful data services that you need. It's not just storing data. I think there have been plugins for Kubernetes that let you talk to storage and let you have persistent storage. This is much more full featured with all of the common things you're looking for around how you leverage and move your data. Is that accurate? Is that safe to say?
Totally. Yeah. It's way beyond things like, of course, we provide, as a data provider, we provide like CSI plugins, right, that fit in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And of course, you'll want to have those installed to take full advantage of NDK, but it goes way beyond that, right? Like with the CSI plugin, you can of course request new storage. With NDK, right? It's such a yes and an extension to all of that, right? Like, is this file share replicated to my DR site, right? What's the RPO it's attached to? Can you show me the list of all of the storage side, right? The like NAS side, if you will, snapshots for that data set. Can I, prune those old snapshots? Can I activate an older one, right, and roll back to before a disaster? All these things that are sort of data management constructs now exposed natively within the Kubernetes realm. So of course I can do them all through Prism the way I always have been able to. And now I can also do them right through Kubernetes, which means my Kubernetes customers, right, can be fully in charge of their data management if they want to, and I can give them a lot more verbs as they build and run their applications.
I like the way you said that. Give you more verbs.
More verbs are better than fewer verbs.
Yeah, I mean it's really the end of the day, right? It's you got to do these things to the data, and it's grown up, right? It's enterprise class. The things we're talking about aren't minimally viable. They are now enterprise class data services.
Mainstream.
Yeah, what's the opposite of that? Maximally capable? Don't know.
I like that.
We'll see. We'll have to give us some soak time.
So I know we're not marketing people, but data to the max.
There you go.
So.
Philip, you did say something interesting before that I would like to point out to our customers is the ability with one cluster to manage multiple services. So you kind of asked Jirah, what's built into this that we're not talking about? For me, migration services, man, to be able to have one cluster that can run my VMs and my containers. From a development standpoint, I'm putting everything that I need in one spot so that my developers can go from one to the other very easily. The other place that this is really shining for us is at the edge. I know a lot of people talk about moving out the cloud and getting off-prem and all that, but there's still a huge need for edge on-prem computing. And this solution fits perfect because, again, it's multi-pronged. We haven't talked about AI in this podcast, but when you've got a cluster that could do an AI workload, do a Kubernetes workload, do a VM workload, have a platform that can report all of those things and show how it's being used and what your run rate is and where your potholes might be coming in the future. That's very powerful. That's not only powerful for developers and IT managers, but for IT leadership that these problems are bubbling up to. They have a way to see results and figure out where they need to go. So again, man, what's hidden under the covers here? Edge services and migration services to get you from where you're at today to where you need to be tomorrow. We fit perfectly in those situations and in those projects.
Yeah, Edge is a great call out, Ben. I have probably talked about it on this podcast before, but I read a case study about a large chicken serving restaurant. And they have retooled their entire ordering process to be mobile first. They run little Kubernetes clusters in every one of their restaurants. So when we talk about edge, I mean, that is powerful. I mean, you can deploy these clusters, these services out in bulk, manage them centrally. It's all API driven. So we are seeing the edge change. Harvey, the other thing I think about is video. We talk a lot with customers about video and running AI and things against that video at the edge, not transmitting all of that data back to a cloud or data center.
Right.
There's a lot of benefits to it.
No, absolutely. I know that, at some point, all of us have at least thought about the ability to run AI without sending any of our data somewhere else. Even if it's something as simple as searching your mailbox, I could use that, but not have that data go anywhere else. Or, I don't know, just being able to pull intelligence out of the files you have, or the video that you have, to your point, and be able to have that done internally within your own stack and not have that go anywhere. I think that is a huge play for the future for some of the people who are not yet jumping out to cloud because they have data that they need to keep secure. And so just being able to add that layer of technology on there that used to be, just cloud exclusive. Now that makes it a little more available to you to use within your own data center.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked, and this has been 10 years ago, but we had video platforms that could count the number of people that came into our retail locations. And that's just one use case. Now I got to think a decade later, what can they do with that video, right? I mean, what intelligence can you pull out of that? And so, this edge use case is really important. And I think the AI tie-in is also important because to me, Kubernetes is becoming mainstream. It's still getting there, but AI and this AI software may be the killer application that really boosts it forward the way that we saw with VMs 15 years ago.
Yeah.
John, what do you think from an application standpoint may be the booster here for data services around Kubernetes?
I think I think you're onto something there. I think that so when I hear Kubernetes, right, I guess I sort of think of that amalgamation of like a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like it's like, to use a bunch of terrible analogies that professional Kubernetes folks will all roll their eyes at. Like it's like, the MSI, like the next finish installer, combined with like the like a WSS or like SCCM, like auto updater functionality, right? Combined with what's usually like a third-party integration for like an agent-based like performance monitor of like what's it doing and how many phone calls per second or transactions per minute or whatever is it doing. It's sort of all these things rolled into one, right? So it's like how the application gets monitored and rolled out and updated. And I think you're spot on, right? That like if you're talking about an application that is vending or using or consuming or feeding some sort of an LLM model or a GPT model today, then yeah, you're probably going to get very frequent updates, right? Which is kind of what Kubernetes is built to do, which is reduce friction from the developers IDE, right? Like you're writing literal, you're not writing in Notepad, but if they were writing in Notepad, right, they hit save, and it flows from their keyboard on their screen all the way into production, hopefully with as few humans along the way, right? A bunch of automated checks, and that application update's now in production. And the more your app is consuming or feeding or wrestling with these huge data sets and analyses that you can now bring to bear, then yeah, you absolutely like. Do I think that, to your question, it's going to be the boost for Kubernetes for other apps? I don't know, because I feel like that's where we also often wrestle, right? Is like, do other apps need that update velocity and low friction environment? Maybe not, right? You couldn't look at any data center at any of our customers and say every app is deployed this one way. Like there's 20 ways to deploy an app in that data center.
Yeah.
Some of them still live on the mainframe, right? Not always, but sometimes still. And so there's not one ring to rule them all for application deployment, but man, there are some pretty wide paths that are pretty well trod around what do apps with a whole ton of velocity need. And it certainly can be containerized services, can be, of course, declarative data services. And often those two things add up together to say, let's run an AI workload.
It's interesting too, because I mean, largely this conversation has been reserved for companies that are writing their own code, that control their own destiny when it comes to applications. There's not a lot of commercially deployed Kubernetes applications today.
They're coming though. They are coming. I've seen two that have been packaged as Kubernetes containers rollout, and so one of them was a security package that, to Jirah's point, had a lot of updates to it. So yes, I agree with you. They're very few and far between, but you are starting to see them on the market, and you're starting to see some of the, from what I hear, some of the larger healthcare companies starting to dive into this and looking at using Kubernetes to roll out their EHRs. So that's going to get real interesting when that happens.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's the important thing is we're waiting on the mass market adoption to kind of drive this as the standard way to operate. We're not there yet, but I think that's one of the interesting things that we're kind of tossing around here is that this may be that next standard way to operate the way that VMs have been the last 15 years.
Well, and I think there's an interesting third space of what does the future look like? What is the virtual appliance equivalent of a containerized application, right? Do I think most application vendors want to trust the customer to be the Kubernetes admin? Maybe, but probably not 100% of the time. So if they want to guarantee success, maybe it is give us the resources and here's our self-building, self-installing, self-monitoring Kubernetes cluster, and you're locked out of it, right? You run it as the you run it as the infrastructure provider. We run it as the application provider. And the ISV, the software vendor, gets the benefits of the rapid updates and the control processes and so forth, without requiring the customer to be the Kubernetes admin. And I think this is where, if I was a customer listening to this podcast, that could be a vein to explore, right? Like if you are being asked by your company, we need some place to run containerized applications, help us get there, right? Without anyone wanting to go really be an in-depth certified 400 level Kubernetes admin, then this ability to say, look, we can quickly stand up the containers, we can quickly give them data storage and protect it without really anyone needing to go get a PhD in Kubernetes. That's pretty cool, right? That's a very powerful but low effort outcome.
And that's an important point. I mean, to date, it takes a lot of decisions because there's a lot of layers. There's some complexity. There's a fair amount of complexity to running Kubernetes. I saw a presentation a few weeks ago, and it's probably the best, but I would say there was 7 to 10 layers where you're going to need to make a decision about what you plug in here. And those 7 to 10 decisions become your opinion of how to run Kubernetes. Great thing about it is you're not locked into one way of doing this. You have choices, lots and lots of choices. To your point earlier, Jirah, the landscape is like hideously large. I mean, there's so many different vendors that play in this Kubernetes space. But you do have the ability to slide in whatever networking, CNI, CSI, monitoring vendor, how you do security. But that has been a major problem to adoption, is that it is more complex and a different operating style. It's interesting to think about, an appliance form factor, and that's sort of what you're delivering here. I have seen applications. I had a web security product that was based on containers, and so I have seen productized things, even on a storage array, where you start to see Kubernetes running different services and things, but inside of something where you have more control, it is a very cool way, a cool thought to think, you're getting more of an easy button. And I think a lot of customers will resonate with that. Trying to think, what did we miss here? Any other thoughts from the blog article?
I don't know that we missed anything. I just will, I guess, clarify for some people really quick. We used a couple of acronyms that I want to go back through. We said NDK, That is Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes. And Phil, you just did CNI and CSI.
Yeah.
CNI, I
Container
believe, yeah,
network
network
interface,
interface. Yep. And CSI is the one that I did not remember.
container storage interface.
There we go. So just wanted to make sure those were out there for the people who are listening and not looking along our blog post that we can't share today. So
Yeah, good old Murphy is messing with us today for today's episode.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think one of the big things to take out of this article for customers that are listening is that you can give the ability to give your DevOps people control of infrastructure and not make them storage admins. So that's one good thing. And then you can look at your Nutanix administrators and go, we can give you the ability to manage, protect, DR Kubernetes containers without being Kubernetes experts. And so it's kind of a win-win for IT departments. They can take people that have no Kubernetes experience and get started with Kubernetes and not have to wait. And then they can take people that are in depth in Kubernetes and running their clusters and containers and all that now and fit right into it. And again, flexibility, man. I think that's the biggest thing that this product brings to organization is the flexibility to do whatever you really need to do today, but also have the services for where you need to go tomorrow.
yeah, I honestly think that's a great way of summing it up. Guys, this has been a good discussion. Yeah, I love these topics, but I also slow to introduce them because they're not straightforward and simple. You know, it takes some thought. We're all learning. There's very few Kubernetes experts in the world, and I don't claim to be one of them. So I definitely appreciate the conversation and the learning together. This has been a great time. So on behalf of the team, I want to say thanks for listening in today. We appreciate it. Definitely go out and check out this blog article. It's called Announcing the General Availability for Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes. Underline that word services. That's really what it's all about. It's more than just storage. It's a lot of different data services. And I think that's the thing I'll take away today. So on behalf of everybody, we appreciate you listening in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Happy birthday, Jirah.
happy birthday.
Thanks, guys.